Hello and happy holidays, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's new episode of the Xbox Factor Podcast. I am one of your hosts today, Mr. BoomStick XL. Folks, as you know, Christmas is in a couple of days. Tomorrow at noon, I will be doing a very special solo show looking into 2026 for Xbox. Have some big quotes from some of the big C-level executives. And we're going to kind of talk about our most excited games from Xbox Game Studios, the path that they have taken for what is expected to be a big celebratory year, and some of the commentary that comes the way of the games that will be coming to Xbox Game Pass next year. And quite frankly, there are some really, really big names showing up. But today, it's going to be just me and Jamie Moran, as our brother from another, Infinite Number, is exhausted from doing a double, ladies and gentlemen. So maybe, again, we don't know for sure because he fell asleep, but he might be joining me tomorrow at noon. I'll see how he's feeling. If not, I'll roll solo dolo, as you know. Tomorrow's show is just a bonus conversation that we're going to have, talking with Mrs. Boom. She's working into the middle of the afternoon. So she had suggested that maybe instead of doing the videos that I was going to do, like the pre-recorded stuff, actually add a Wednesday show tomorrow, kind of talk, pick a particular topic. And then, of course, on New Year's Eve, I'll be doing the same thing, except this time it is going to be a multi-plat show. We're going to be talking about my personal top 10 games that I'm most anticipating for 2026. And that's when we're going to get the chat involved. And you're going to give me yours, and we're going to read them aloud. So, of course, before we get to all of the conversation that we're going to have today, and quite frankly, there is a lot. Jamie Moran, it has been a morning for both you and me, but you're here. Welcome. Happy holidays, brother.
Hey, man. Merry Christmas. It's a good time to be a gamer. Lots of stuff coming out. I'm sure, like myself, a lot of people are going to be playing games over Christmas, maybe drinking a bit too much, as per usual. But yeah, let's talk about some games. That's I've been playing a lot of Arc Raiders over the past few days, and I'm in a good mood.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I have been catching up on a couple of games. I've been playing a little bit of the Terminator 2 side scroller. I went back to Marvel Cosmic Invasion, another 2D masterclass release of 2025. I went back into Call of Duty. I'm about to Prestige 3 right now, and I was doing some legwork to unlock some gear, and I finally unlocked the heat signature scope, which is my absolute favorite. And I found the second one that I have to unlock, and you got to get these guns up into the high 30s, sometimes even the low 40s, in order to unlock some of this stuff. And I am using a particular firearm. I think it's a submachine gun. I think it's a submachine gun. I don't like the burst effect. I like the full-on pull the trigger and just spray and pray, as they call it. But this one is going to take a while to. I'm probably going to say maybe the rest of the day trying to level up so I can get this second heat signature scope. Those are my absolute favorite because it makes it easier to know who's good and who is going to catch a round. But ladies and gentlemen, look, we got a lot of topics to get into, and we're going to keep it light. We're going to keep it fun. The first one that I want to get into is a story that is titled here, ladies and gentlemen, and that's because we have news from Jez Corden of Windows Central, who said on the podcast he's on with Randall Thor 19 regarding the Elder Scrolls 6 engine overhaul. Reportedly, according to Jez, it's going to include Unreal Engine. Now, that is very strange, considering that we thought the newer version of the Creation Engine was going to be both for Fallout 5 and the Elder Scrolls 6. Well, we have new information here that makes us think that it might be potentially a bit of both, which is crazy, but also a full-on switch to Unreal Engine 5, and that would be a story in itself. But Jamie, before I actually hand the mic over to get your thoughts on this, I want to read the article from GameRant.com. This was posted by Dominic Bosnick. It was published 2 days ago. I had it in the queue, and obviously I set it up for, well, today's conversation. Well, Dominic goes on to say in his opening salvo of the article, which has already been added to the show notes, folks, if you want to, of course, give it a read. He goes on to say this, chat and Jamie. Bethesda is reportedly overhauling the Elder Scrolls 6 engine with support from Microsoft and plans to integrate select Unreal Engine technologies. That's according to a new report from well-known insider who has also shared additional details about the purported project and talked about how they all connect to the next chapter of Starfield, which Bethesda is expected to launch well before the likes of Skyrim's sequel. Goes on to say this: the information comes from Jez Corden, who has a generally reliable track record with Microsoft related scoops. He previously reported that the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion remaster months before its official announcement, and has lately been sharing early details about the Elder Scrolls 6 from his sources. This trend continued with the December 19th episode of the Xbox 2 podcast, where he offered new insights into the creation engine, Starfield, and the Elder Scrolls 6 elements that to some extent are interconnected. Well, look, I'm going to continue reading, folks, because there is context here that's worthy of the read. Dominic goes on to continue and say, according to Corden's sources, Bethesda is currently updating the creation engine while, quote, leveraging aspects of the Unreal Engine and integrating them into its own in-house technology. Microsoft, the owner of Bethesda's parent company, ZeniMax Media, is reportedly supporting the effort with internal specialists. Among them is said to be the coalition's technical director, Kate Rayner, who was name dropped during the podcast episode. The unspecified Unreal tech is expected to feature in the studio's next project, and the Elder Scrolls 6 long been confirmed to also use the same creation engine. Jamie, this is very interesting because what it does seem like, and again, I'm only gonna speculate on the article that's in front of me and what Jez Corden has suggested during the Xbox 2 podcast with Rand. What's interesting here is the creation engine based on the what I just read doesn't seem to be that it's being abandoned. What it seems like is they're going to be adding to it. And what's interesting is it was suggested, and you obviously everyone heard what I wrote, what I read from the article, that we might be getting a preview of what this looks like in functionality with the Starfield 2.0 update that's expected to potentially release next spring. That's also not only getting an Xbox version, a PC version, but also releasing on the PlayStation 5. When they, again, what we're hearing about the noticeable differences in Starfield 2.0, well, this actually might be it. Let's get your thoughts on what so far, or what the information we have.
I mean, this is exciting because when the Elder Scrolls 6, it's going to be a huge game, and it's going to be the type of game that gets support for quite a while from the studio. But while you were reading that out, I actually did a little bit of research, and I was going to make a Twitter post about this later, and I still will, but I'll mention it now. I think that, there's a lot of developers working on these games now that have a lot of experience with Unreal Engine and the tools and the framework. They're just used to that and how you can produce content. So, like, if they're making the creation engine easier to use for these developers that have past experience with Unreal Engine, and, maybe they can get out content faster, which, it's been a big problem for a lot of developers this generation. Shocker, I'm going to make something about Mass Effect. Mass Effect Andromeda, they switched engines to Frostbite, and they had lots of issues. There wasn't even a third-person camera tool when they were making the game. So I could talk about that game all day for reasons. but basically a lot of the developers were heavily experienced with Unreal Engine, so shifting to Frostbite was a big it was a bad time for them, and thankfully now they're moving back to Unreal. But a lot of these developers, they have so much experience with Unreal and how the tools work that, yeah, it makes sense to make the creation engine a bit more like Unreal when it comes to its tool set. It might sound boring to the gamer, but at the end of the day, we're going to get more content, which is a win for everyone. And the funny thing is, right, we all waiting here for Starfield's second expansion, right? And Starfield originally came out in September 2023. My God, that feels like a lifetime ago. But here we are in 2025, almost 26, and we're still waiting for a second expansion. So, Fallout 3 came out in 2008, one of my favorite games of all time. We had 5 expansions for that game, right? 5. I'm going to tell you the release dates for each one, and this will blow people's minds. So, bear in mind, Fallout 3 came out in 2018. I can't speak today. 2008. Operation Anchorage came out in January 2009. The Pit came out in March 2009. Broken Steel came out in May 2009. Point Lookout came out in June 2009. And Mothership Zeta came out early August 2009. So we had 5 expansions
in a year.
Yeah,
wow,
less than a year, 8 months. So like, now here we are, a couple of years after Starfield, and we've had 1 expansion. These games are really big, they're ambitious compared to what they used to be, and they were great games. But games are taking far too long to develop. All these developers know this. Like, there was a behind the scenes thing at Gamescom with all these developers talking about how they need to try and get games out faster, because all we've heard for the past couple of years is how, oh yeah, AAA gaming takes around 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to make a game. It's not sustainable. You know, one of the reasons why Bethesda wanted to be purchased was because if they have a game that's not a mega hit, it could potentially shut them down. Whereas if you have Microsoft backing you, yeah, you can put out a Starfield, you can put out these big titles and have less risk, but you can also put out some more experimental titles, and it's working out well for them. But to have them be able to make the creation engine more like Unreal just tells me they're going to be able to get more content out faster. And that's a win for everyone. Like, the Elder Scrolls 6 is meant to be really ambitious from the leaks we've seen.
Yes, we're going to get into that. Actually, we're going to segue into it because we have a massive spread here that comes away and courtesy of the Gamerverse on Twitter. This is a 4chan leak that we're going to get into on the back end of this conversation.
Yeah, you know, I've seen people in chat mention this, and I've seen a lot of people mention this today. That, you know, why doesn't Bethesda just scrap the creation engine? Like, you have to realize the creation engine is very complex, right? You can drop a sword in a random cave, come back 100 hours later, it's there, right? It's a very complex engine. Unreal Engine's great, right? Like, I was talking about Arc Raiders before. Arc Raiders is beautiful. It has incredible lighting, and its performance is locked 60 across the board, right? No issues, right? The developers took the time with that game, but it's very limited, right? You know, you can climb walls, you can run, you can, you know, crouch. It's very limited in the gameplay mechanics. That game is mainly about its movement and how enemies work. But with Fallout, Elder Scrolls, Starfield, you have this like interconnected world where everything is like basically the game remembers where everything is placed. It's ridiculous if you think about it. Like, you could take your entire inventory, which could be hundreds, if not thousands of items, drop them on the ground, and just leave and come back later. It's there. It's a cool thing, and you know, I get, like, you know, Unreal Engine 5, it's shiny, people like it, but like, if they're used to making these games with the creation engine and they just have a lot of people that have worked on Unreal and they just want to make the tool set, but I don't see a problem. Like, Starfield can look incredible. Like, there's some planets you can go to and you're like, it looks a bit weird, but I think Starfield, it's a great looking game. And I think another thing people have to realize is that when it comes to the creation engine, we've had 1 new game since Fallout 4, right? Fallout 4, I think, is a really good looking game. And, you know, you have Fallout 76. I haven't played that, so I can't speak to it. But we haven't had many creation engine games when you look at other titles. So, like, to me, it just tells me we're going to get more content, which is great, because again, we had 5 Fallout 3 expansions in less than a year.
Unbelievable.
Right? I would love to see that for other games. Like, look, hell, we've been waiting how long for a new GTA? 12 years. And it's going to be 13
Might be
plus.
longer.
Yeah, it's going to be even longer. Like, so, like, to me, it just means more content faster, which is always a good thing. I have a theory that over the next year or two, we're going to see a lot of developers try and shift from this whole 5-6 year development cycle and even get more expansions out. Because again, there's been a lot of great single player games out this year. There's been a lot of support for a lot of these games. So if they can just get more content out faster, that's a win for everyone. And I think the creation engine, if you play Starfield and you go to some of the opening sections, like, these can be beautiful looking areas. Just depends on time of day, weather, and all that stuff. But this is good news if you like Elder Scrolls content, Fallout content, and obviously the next Fallout game is quite a while away, unfortunately. But even with this news, that means we might get Fallout sooner. So it's a win for everyone.
Yeah, you know, I what I want to do is I want to read another paragraph because it really did answer or confirm my earlier statement on if we are going to see a preview of this in Starfield 2.0. Now, Jez goes on to confirm that Starfield is reportedly a test bed for the Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5 engine tech. Check this out, folks. The article goes on to say the ongoing engine revamp will reportedly first be deployed into Bethesda's 2023 spacefaring RPG. Quote, Starfield is having like a something of a technical overhaul, Corden added. Some of those improvements are also things that are going to inform how the next Fallout plays and how the next Elder Scrolls plays. One detail, Corden goes on to say, that may support this claim is Starfield's Steam patch history, which shows a quote Lumens branch update only once on July 29th of 2024. For reference, Lumen without the S is an Unreal Engine lighting system introduced into Unreal Engine 5. The article says that it enables dynamic, real-time light and shadow behavior without requiring developers to manually pre-bake lighting, while it supports ray tracing and is sometimes used interchangeably within it in a informal context. It does not require it. Look, I absolutely love this story. And I say that because, look, we literally, Jamie, yesterday had an entire episode dedicated to RPGs. Bethesda, Playground Games, Fable, Obsidian, hey, had a big conversation yesterday with it, which I eventually, and today's been super busy, folks, so I'm going to cut that down into smaller bite-size video. So if you missed it and you want to specifically listen to one part or the other, it'll be up later on this afternoon for your listening pleasure. But getting into this story, this is a really big deal. And you know what, Jamie? You said something that just made me smile. And that was maybe we will get these games quicker. Now, look, I can't honestly tell you how long until we actually play the Elder Scrolls 6, right? We did have a report that said the earliest would be 28, right? Potentially 29. I originally thought, and I had it, pegged as a launch title for the new Xbox in 27, but they literally started work on this, I think, in 2024, maybe 2023 if we're lucky. So this game isn't coming out before 28. We did hear a story or an interview with Todd Howard where he specifically discussed how they're going to have overlapping projects, and that's the norm at Bethesda. They are finishing one, they start work on the other. There's a team working on what they're about to launch. There's another team working about what they're going to ship in a couple of years. So the overlap, because of this new integration, may actually, Jamie, make the work quicker. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be an overhaul where it's just going to be like the creation engine kicked out and Unreal Engine takes over. No, I actually don't think they're doing that. I think the way it was explained, and I want to get your thought, I want you to elaborate a little bit on the development process, because you might actually be onto something here. If they could figure out a way to integrate both the Creation 2.0 and, of course, the new Unreal Engine, which I think the last one was Unreal Engine 5.6 was the last one that I recall. If they can incorporate these two engines to work seamlessly, and they use a massive size game like Starfield, and they get that to work, we could actually see the development process. Maybe you get a year, maybe you get 18 months shaved off of the development of Fallout 5, and we're playing it in 2030 rather than 2033. Let's get your thoughts on that.
I mean, maybe we can call this hopium or copium, but I'm
Probably.
I'm I'm a glass half full type guy when it comes to this. I think it just means we're going to get content out faster. And look, this past generation, people have been talking about how, like, it's taken too long to get games out. If you look back at the 7th generation, and I will always say good things about the 7th generation, but like, if you played a good game that did well in the 7th generation, you probably got an entire trilogy that generation, right? We had 3 Mass Effect games, 3 Arkham games. We had 4 Gears of War games, right? 3 Dead Space games. Peak Call of Duty didn't even have microtransactions. We had multiple great Battlefield games. We had multiple Dragon Age titles. I could go on. We had 3 Bioshock games. This generation, last generation, we've had 0 Bioshock games, 0 Dead Space games outside of the remake. We've had 1 Mass Effect game, which is, well, we'll just leave that to the side for a minute. But we don't really get sequels that often anymore, and people will say the quality's better now. And it is, right? But at this rate, it's going to take like 10 years for a sequel to like some like random linear third-person shooter that, a couple of years from now. It's getting ridiculous, right? So it does sound futuristic when we say, oh, Fallout 5 will be like 2032. I think at the earliest, if like what we're saying doesn't happen, I think 2032 is the earliest we get Fallout 5. But I think like it's getting really unrealistic to have like a decade in between sequels, right? So like my hope is that this means they're going to get content out faster. They're going to have more developers that are used to these tools, which just means we'll have an Elder Scrolls and a Fallout in the same generation. What a shocker! Like we used to, because I would love to have that. And look, we've been talking about how Elder Scrolls 6 was probably going to be a launch title for next generation for 2-3 years now, right? That's the thought people have had. Reasonable why people have thought that, but now, like, they went into full production basically when Starfield went out the door in September 2023. And how long does an Elder Scrolls game take to make now? Right? 4, 5, 6 years. We really don't know. That being a launch title, unless next gen gets pushed out further because of the RAM issues, and I don't want to bore people at Christmas time with RAM stuff, but to me, it just signifies that we're going to get more games out sooner. And it's what I want, right? Because, look, I used to love playing games, enjoying them, and then getting a sequel 2 or 3 years later, right? How cool was that? Again, I'm going to make it about Mass Effect, shocker to no one. But, like, Mass Effect 1 came out in 2007, blew my mind, right? I was like, my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread, right? And then what did we get in 2010? Mass Effect 2, right? We had multiple expansions. And do you know what was announced the same year Mass Effect 2 came out? Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 3's trailer came out at the Game Awards in 2010, right? Blew my mind, right? And then we got Mass Effect 3 2 years later. And by the way, Mass Effect 3 is technically the longest game of the trilogy with the most content, right? And then we got multiple expansions for that. So, like, in the span of 6 years, we had 3 Mass Effect games and 11 or 12 expansions, plus a multiplayer mode, that had free content for over a year.
Incredible, dude.
And
Yeah.
now, what do we get? Nothing. Zip. Right? Maybe it's my salty inner Mass Effect fan coming out because I'm needing a new Mass Effect game sometime soon. But we had all that content in that amount of time, and I missed that. And I'm sure developers would like to get multiple games out in a decade. When Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic was announced, right? That game, this rumor just randomly went across the internet saying it's not coming out till 2030, right? And
Thankfully, that was debunked by the head of the studio.
yeah, the head of the studio debunked straight away. Absolute legend. But like, that game is coming out sooner. Is it coming out next year? I don't think so. I think at the earliest that's going to be late 2027, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be very happy. But like, these developers, they know we need to get games out sooner. It's taken way too long. And I know you would like to play multiple expansions for a new game that you like, maybe within the same year, because again, I love Starfield. I could talk about Starfield all day. However, this isn't
Yeah.
like it was with Fallout 3. It's taken a long time to get expansions out, right? They have teams working on expansions. They have teams working on Elder Scrolls 6. The way I see it, this is a good step in the right direction, and it just means more content out faster. And Fallout 5, hopefully, maybe this decade. Again, that's hopium. But man, just thinking about all these great games people want, right? Again, we haven't had a new Fallout game since 2014 or 15, whenever Fallout 4 came out. But like, people have been wanting a new Fallout game for a long time, and there's people that were kids when Fallout 4 came out, and they may have kids when Fallout 5 releases. That's crazy, right? So yeah, this just means more games sooner, and I hope that we will actually see Fallout sometime before we all before our bones are dust. But that's just me.
No, I mean, listen, you make a great point, and just for some clarity, Casey Hudson's the one is the one that came out that is doing the Fate of the Old Republic. That he actually the one that debunked, that story that came the way of Jason Schreier. So again, we'll see. I'm glad that it's not coming out in 2030 because, yikes! But look, I said it yesterday, chat and Jamie Moran, and I'll say it again today. Bethesda finds themselves in one of the most unique positions any publisher could ever want to be in. And that is they have too many incredible IPs. I know the real world problems, ladies and gentlemen, but when you consider that, they just added Indiana Jones, which is rumored to have a trilogy, right? That story is going to continue, and it's the first game. You talk about it all the time. Is just incredible. The DLC is incredible as well. But when you consider what they're working with and what they're working on, Starfield is getting a 2.0. They're calling it the 2.0 version of Cyberpunk. That big Cyberpunk upgrade that we saw, well, they're calling it their Cyberpunk moment. Has me very excited because I will replay this game from scratch. I will want to play this game with the new engine, with the new stuff running in the background, and I'm going to be very excited to do so. But they also have Elder Scrolls, which we know, thanks to Jamie, he reminded me that they did start, quote, pre-production in 23. So that overlap that Todd Howard was talking about, they're about to ship Starfield, they're about to start working on Elder Scrolls, is probably what Todd Howard was referring to in his Variety interview, right? That makes a lot of sense. Now we kind of get into a little bit of troubled waters because, look, has been a rumor that the Fallout 3 remake is going to be dropped soon. How soon? Well, if I had to guess, I'd say the developer direct in a couple of weeks. There's been some suggestions from Paris Lilly, and it's not a confirmation. He literally said that if it were him, he would drop it the last week before the finale of the Fallout TV series season 2. That makes brilliant sense, but also that just so happens to line up with the developer direct. So maybe that's what he was referring to. I said it before. Me personally, I would have did it to the lead up of the show, but it makes sense to do it on the back end because people are going to be so excited, not only because they're going to get a glimpse into what season 3 is going to be about, but they just finished watching season 2, which so far is pretty damn incredible. So it lines up that we could get this quote shadow drop, if you will, at the developer direct in January, which has been confirmed to be a thing. But this is the troubled waters I'm talking about. Let's just say for shits and giggles, Jamie, that Fallout 3 remake comes out, it's shadow drop, and it does gangbuster numbers. People are jazzed. People want to play more Fallout. Jez Corden confirmed, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, that there are rumors that Fallout New Vegas is getting the same treatment as not only Fallout 3, but also Oblivion, which has me hyped because that's my favorite Fallout. These two Fallout reboots or remakes, if you will, would I think certainly tide over the Fallout community looking for something that's not Fallout 76, which is a game not for me. I'm more of a single player guy, just like you, Jamie. But again, this is a giant but, right? This would take the pressure, at least in my personal opinion, off of the release of Fallout 5. Because I don't necessarily know if they were looking down the road further enough to see whether or not the Fallout series was going to hit like it did. And I don't know who to blame for that is, but look, at the end of the day, if we can get a Fallout 3 remake on the level of Oblivion and follow that up with a Fallout New Vegas remake in the form of what they did for Fallout 3 remake, I would be okay having to wait for Fallout 5. And I know a lot of people would as well. But look, shout out to Rayoid. He says Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition had gotten a small boost as well. You know what's funny? Thanaros goes on to say Fallout 5 doesn't even need BGS to make it. That's a very interesting thought and theory, Thanaros, and I like what you're putting down. But here's the thing. Todd Howard likes to play with his own toys, and I think he really wants to put his stamp on these games. That's why Starfield is getting the 2.0 version. It is ultimately going to be his vision that he originally thought about this game being, which I think is brilliant for him because it's been a lifelong project. The Elder Scrolls is going to have the Todd Howard touch. It just is. And as well as Fallout, Fallout is his thing. That's his baby. You know what I'm saying? So look, it's going to be fun for anyone. And when I say anyone, that's because I think all of these games are releasing everywhere. Like the days of Starfield having a 2+ year hold on Xbox and PC, I think that's done. I think that the path has been laid, Jamie, and I think that every game that comes out moving forward, whether it be a remake, remaster, or a brand new title, is going to release everywhere because Xbox, and more specifically Microsoft, loves money. And they're going to want these games. All of these games are going to sell gangbuster when they release, whenever they release. But I want to segue into a posting. Now, folks, this is mind-blowing stuff. Now, I want it to be clear. We are using a post from the Gamerverse on Twitter. I have already added their link to the show notes. So if you want to give them a follow, awesome. If you want to read what they posted, because it's pretty lengthy, let's just talk about, before we get into the details, where this is coming from. So let's just start off by saying, take this with a ginormous grain of salt because it is a 4chan leak. Now, granted, 4chan leaks sometimes are bombastic and wrong. Sometimes, every now and again, they're this bombastic and they're right. So let's just take it with a grain of salt, folks. And I'm going to read you some of the information coming out of this massive 4chan leak. Goes on to say, and this is a summary for the Elder Scrolls 6. The title is Elder Scrolls 6 Lilac. Now, that may be a holding name or a project name. I don't think it's going to be called Lilac, but again, salt, folks, grain of salt. It goes on to say a couple of big things here. The setting, and we've heard about this going back a couple of years, Jamie, that the setting is going to be in Hammerfell, plus the coastal high rock of Lilac Bay. It's going to potentially have shipbuilding and sailing, which sounds both awesome, and I don't like it because I don't like the building in Starfield. I didn't like the building in Fallout 4. I probably not like the building here, but I regress. It goes on to say that it's going to have settlement building, procedural generation for Lilac Bay. And I think this is a page right out of what they did with Starfield. Goes on to say factions. There's going to, of course, be the returning Thieves Guild, Dark Brotherhood, the Fighters Guild, and the Mages Guild. It's going to, of course, have the Imperial Cult and Temple of the Three that will not be joinable according to this leak. Crowns and Forebearers are mutually exclusive factions. So if you join one of the other factions, you won't be able to join either the Forebears or the Crowns. The internal code name for the project is White Beach. Some details align with older leaks where they point out sailing and ship building. Now, what was not included in the leak is sword singing for players and generic Starfield type of NPCs. Now, the story, Jamie and chat, says that it revolves around Nocturnal Prite and the Archiviri artifact. Crowns and Forebears oppose the Thamor and the Admiral invasion. World rules, towns, and outcomes change based on your faction's choice. And it finally goes on to say regarding the story, main ending similar, but there will be paths that differ for everyone. So it goes on to say a couple more bullet points here, and then we're going to get into our thoughts here, folks. World and tech. It's going to be open world. That's not a surprise. Cities and interiors mostly seamless, few load zones. Goes on to say procedural generation for certain areas separate from the handcrafted zone. So it's going to have both. And I would imagine they're probably going to do heavy work on the actual handcrafted work, but there's probably going to be a big portion of it that's going to be procedural generated. Maybe, it's going to be one world. It's not going to be like you're going to planets, but there might be caves that change. It might be forests or, underground locations that change. But of course, this is a leak, so take it with a grain of salt, folks. So this is where it gets very interesting. It says, and again, it's a leak, folks, so don't get bent out of shape. It's not Xbox exclusive like I had suggested, but it does go on to say the PlayStation version has reportedly been delayed internally. I don't know what that means. I mean, again, this is going to be big. I think, again, plans could change. This is going to sell on every platform it launches on. But I don't know if this leak is something that's recent or what, but take it with a grain of salt, folks. Jamie, I want to bring you in on this. There's a lot to unpack here. Again, we just opened up the show talking about the Elder Scrolls and its potential of having introduction or additions of Unreal Engine 5 and seeing that in Starfield 2.0. But this particular topic gets into a lot of the deets regarding its story, its factions, and more importantly, it appears, based on this report or this leak, if you will, that it is going to launch on Xbox first and PlayStation second. Let's get your thoughts on what I just discussed.
Well, I'll mention the shipbuilding thing first. By the way, I love Starfield. I do not touch the shipbuilding mechanic.
Me either. I did
It's
it
like,
once and I was a disaster.
yeah,
Yes.
like before that game came out, I was like, I'm gonna make the Normandy SR2, maybe the Starship Enterprise. No, none of that. Like, I can't be bothered. If I could pay someone else to do it, maybe. But I think shipbuilding would work really well. Sailing ships. From what I get from this is that factions in Skyrim would actually be against each other, but you wouldn't really see it play out outside of a few soldiers fight. With this, I'm hoping again. Maybe I'm being really optimistic. Maybe we're going to get some really big Game of Thrones style rivalries between kingdoms. That's what I got from this, and I think it would work really well, especially with how you can side with factions in an Elder Scrolls game. Ship battles. I can only imagine what those will be like because I love as much as I don't play do the shipbuilding thing in Starfield. I love going out into space and battling against other starships. Boarding other starships. So we're gonna have that, but with sailing ships. That sounds pretty cool to me. The procedural generation when it comes to the base stuff, to me that just sounds like they're gonna have it so maybe the ships procedurally going in and out the bay, like how you have starships coming down
That makes sense.
to land in the cities in Starfield. I think that's really cool. The shipbuilding stuff was in a previous leak. That's why I do lean to this being kind of real. And it just seemed like something Bethesda would want to expand on because they seemed really happy with how shipbuilding turned out in Starfield. So I completely, believe that the way factions work, bringing back the Dark Brotherhood. I know people have been wanting that. It wasn't in this leak, but it was in a previous leak that dragons are coming back, which after you play Skyrim, you kind of have to.
You
Right?
absolutely have to have dragons, dude, 100%. Whether you can actually control them or not, or you get shouts, I don't care so much about that, but you got to at least fight these dragons.
Yeah, so you can't take a step back and not have dragons. And if we have shipbuilding and being able to use ships to attack other ships, maybe we fight dragons with those ships. That sounds pretty cool.
That sounds dope.
So if we're gonna have big scale battles and stuff, I can totally see that happening. The creation engine got a lot better with Starfield when it comes to lots of enemies on screen at the same time, and lots of players. So yeah, a lot of NPCs, should I say. But yeah, I completely believe that. When it comes to the whole exclusivity thing, look, it's the Elder Scrolls. Microsoft, we've all kind of talked about it a million times by now. We know Microsoft's shifting strategy when it comes to releasing titles. And look, Forza Horizon 6, that's going to be on Xbox first, right?
Yes, that's
Xbox
correct.
is the priority for their titles, and if they go elsewhere afterwards, okay, fair enough. But Elder Scrolls is a big game. It's going to take a long time to make, as we've just been talking about. So it kind of makes sense. It's going to be on Xbox first. I mean, look, Elder Scrolls is going to be one of those games where it's an event, right? We don't have a lot of games that are events when they launch, where everyone stops talking about everything else and everyone's just talking about that game. Elden Ring was maybe one of the last ones. A Grand Theft Auto is one of them. Fallout, a From Software game, and basically Elder Scrolls and Fallout. Those are big event titles. So I completely believe these leaks and rumors. It will be interesting to see how they've actually gone in depth with factions before, because if you've played the Oblivion remaster or remake, the faction, I love Oblivion. This isn't a knock on it. It's just because it came out in 2006. The faction quests, they're not really that in depth. Go to one place, pick something up, destroy an enemy, leave. Very simple, but again, it was a 2006 game. And Skyrim did it a lot better, but it just seems like they're going to take the mechanics from previous games people liked and just make them more in depth, make them more with the themes that works in those games. I think ship combat is going to be pretty big in that game, because in previous Elder Scrolls games we haven't really had a reason to go into the water. swim down a little bit, maybe pick up some items or whatever. But like, there's never really been, sailing or anything like that. So like, this is going to add a completely different dynamic to the game. Kingdoms fighting each other. You're going to have a massive, water source for people to sail on. That's very different because in Skyrim we had tiny little rivers. There was some small lakes. Like there was nothing like that. So like there being shipbuilding and ships like this that you can sail, that's going to be a completely different kind of Elder Scrolls game, right? You're online for the entire game in previous Elder Scrolls games. So to me, it sounds like a game changer. They're really mixing up the formula, and I like what they're going to be doing with it.
Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? It would be epic to have all of this just working. I mean, look, you mentioned dragons. I got super stoked because it's not in fantasy games, right? Dragons are a big part. We didn't have any dragons in Avowed, right? Avowed came out and it had big bosses. It had its creatures, but we didn't have any dragons. Um, it would be really really cool for them to not just side add these to the next Elder Scrolls, but make it a big part. Because again, that was a big part of Skyrim. The dragons being there were a big part of it. They have to incorporate it in one way. Maybe not as important to the plot line as it was for Skyrim, because that's already been done. But to make it a vital part of what's going on in the world, that again, when you talk about just happen to be I'm in the woods and I run into a dragon, holy shit, what do I do? Right? So that's the kind of conversation I do hope happens. And look, based on some of the talk that we talk, we opened up the show with, it does seem like they're trying to figure out a way to streamline development where, and I know this is going to be a touchy subject for some, developers are going to use tools that are provided to them. Some of those tools, ladies and gentlemen, are going to be AI. That's just a thing. Will they incorporate more than half of development in AI? I don't think so. Not with Todd Howard running the show. I think development at Bethesda is going to remain as it's always been with the help of AI, and maybe this help will, kind of speed up the process on some things that are, considered redundant in development. Now, again, I can't tell you what that is, folks, because I don't make games. I play them and talk about them. But all I know is I am jazzed to see conversation, whether it be a 4chan leak or otherwise, about the world, the story, the tech, and some of the information that was posted in this leak. And you talked about it earlier. The dragons part wasn't in here, but I recall that leak of dragons. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be a major plot line. I think the actual game's plot line is going to be similar to what we're dealing with. It could be, an artifact to end the world. Who knows? But I think that a lot of people want to get to Hammerfell, and I think that that's going to be the center of the story. And where they go from there, Jamie, is going to be super interesting. And guess what? This is coming. These are Xbox exclusive games. Yes, they will be releasing on other platforms. That is the path. But we will be getting all of this in Xbox Game Pass. And Bethesda is considered and owned by Microsoft. They are first party. This, again, I said it yesterday, and I want to repeat it again, Jamie. There is no place like Xbox when you talk about RPGs. There just isn't. They have the best RPG makers in the freaking business. You have Bethesda, you have inXile, and you have Obsidian. I mean, talk about a trio of incredible developers. Xbox gamers should be smiling from freaking ear to ear. But any parting thoughts before we get to the last topic of the show? Because this one is going to be dropped on our doorstep by Ecstasies. We got to talk about this, brother. But any last thoughts?
Yeah, with Oblivion, the big hook for the game was the Oblivion gates. Each one was a big challenge. There was always something cool in there, and there was tougher enemies in there. But that was the big draw to the game. When you cleared out an Oblivion Gate, the area became all sunny again. Nice stuff. In Skyrim, the big hook was the dragon shouts as well as the dragons, but there was also giants in the game. Can you remember when you first got hit by a giant's club in Skyrim? You went flying like a mile into the air. It was hilarious. And then there was mammoths in the game as well. And that's something that game did really well, was just like the big enemies. And that was the big draw to the game. And when you're just like low on health, trying to get to the nearest town or whatever, and then a dragon would come overhead and you'd see a big shadow on the ground, like that was like a wow moment for that game. Yeah, I just saw it in chat. Ragdolled. Yeah, getting ragdolled in the air by the
I
giant
remember
club.
that.
Like, it was hilarious. And the same thing happened with the dragon as well. Like, if you got hit by a dragon a certain way, you go flying across the map. And I think, like, what is the big hook for the new Elder Scrolls game? I think dragons, giants, mammoths, all that stuff will be saber tooths maybe. They'll probably go wild, but like the big draw might actually be the naval combat mechanic, which could be really cool. Big scale battle mechanic. We don't know, but it is Elder Scrolls. I'm sure they'll surprise us. And you mentioned the whole AI thing. Like, AI is a weird topic. Like, some people get really angry when you mention AI. Some people really push for it. I'm kind of indifferent, right? Like, I think AI could be used as a tool, but just that. It doesn't have to be something that, hey, we want to make this fantasy game. By the way, AI, make half of it for us. Like, I don't think
I agree. Yep.
That's not going to be a thing. Like, look at Expedition 33, right? Brilliant game. Absolutely beautiful. And over the past 3 or 4 days, actually since the Game Awards, people have been angry saying, oh, this game used AI. Do you know what they used AI for? And people have been losing their marbles
Ridiculous.
over Expedition 33 using AI. They used AI for placeholder textures, right? So, like, all this, like, crap people were losing their marbles online about was just some textures most people didn't even see, right? I think as a tool, yeah, of course it can help games get made faster, as long as it's used as a tool. It is Todd Howard's game. I'm sure AI may be talked about, but like, we need to move back from this whole like fear mongering thing from AI, right? AI, in my opinion, we get a lot of slop. We see it every day, but AI can also help. AI can help in the medical field, right? It always gets brought up when it comes to art and style and stuff. Like, AI can actually help do research in the medical field. AI just isn't about doing art, right? And like, AI can detect bugs, maybe, right? It could be used for any amount of different things. But like, when it comes to like a game coming out and people seeing the term AI next to it, people lose their minds. Like, Expedition 33 got 2 awards taken from them because of this AI thing, and it was just textures. So like, to me, like, I think we've seen in the past like AI replacing voice actors, yeah, which I just saw in chat. Like, that is a big no-no for me. Right, voice actors, I could tell the difference between an AI voice and a real actor. I think most people can, right? It's the slop we see online that kind of makes people think, okay, this is bad. I don't want this in gaming. Like, I don't want to see AI art. I don't want to hear AI actors. But if it can help developers make a game easier and faster, yeah. And like, procedural generation back in the 90s, right? Perfectly fine. 2000s, perfectly fine. Whenever procedural generation gets brought up, people are fine with it because they get given a bunch of variables. It does its thing, Because, listen to me, because I'm a fancy game developer, but like, these procedural generated things in games, right? They get given a bunch of different like variables to do a thing, right? Same with No Man's Sky. That's why you have like 18 quintillion planets, right? AI can just help. So when it comes to AI replacing something, replacing art, replacing actors, that's a big no-no for me. Big no-no. I don't think most people want that. But when it comes to helping make a game faster, helping debug games, maybe like, again, Expedition 33, putting in textures for when they're making the game, but not for people to see. That's perfectly fine. And if you're on social media a lot, like myself and Boom, you see a lot of people online complaining about AI. but they don't really want to mention the benefits. I've just mentioned like what I don't want to see. I'm not one of these people. I'm not going to praise AI every single day. I don't think
No.
AI has a place in a lot of fields, but if it can help a dev make a game, why not? And we see indie developers and experimenting with this stuff. Like, if it helps, why not? But yeah, that's just my take. And back to the whole, Elder Scrolls thing. I think when it comes out in a couple of years, people are going to be bloody happy. We've been wanting a new Elder Scrolls game for so long now. Like, Skyrim came out in November 2011.
Jesus
right?
Christmas.
That
Wow.
was a lifetime ago. Right?
Yeah, it sure
Crazy.
was. Yeah.
And remember the hype for that game before it came out? Right? That hype was unbelievable. You had midnight openings for the game, midnight launches. Like, people were ecstatic for it. And that was back before we had to install games. You popped the disc in that night and you saw a dragon, right? That was a special moment in gaming. And I think, if Elder Scrolls 6 is done right, we'll have the same moment again.
I agree. I think you're onto something here. Shout out to Mustafa in the chat. Says the new updated engine for Unreal is 5.7. So actually, somebody actually had said that earlier. But thank you for the confirmation that it is now 5.7 for Unreal. And again, we'll see what that does, or how those tools are worked into Starfield 2.0 and then beyond that. But look, we have, ladies and gentlemen, another topic that I want to go to, and I did not plan it like this. It's just the information that has been out there, and I got to be honest, Jamie. The last couple of days, I'd even say the last couple of weeks, there has been a lot of really exciting, positive Xbox news, going all the way back to when it was confirmed right before the Game Awards went live that there would that Matt Booty said that, of course, Playground Games was going to be on display. He didn't specifically say which of the two titles, but I'm assuming it's going to be two of them. And we had the rumor pop out where it was not confirmed, but it is a rumor that's circulating, thanks to Colt Eastwood, that there would be 7 games shown at the event. Which is normally a 50-minute to 1 hour event. This could be a buck. It could be a 90-minute event, maybe a little bit more than that. But the news that continues to come out for Xbox in the last couple of weeks, outside of one hiccup or two, has been incredibly, incredibly exciting. And this next story, you might sound like like, oh, this is not, this is an RPG episode part 2. Turns out that we're going to close out the show with some new information that comes the way of Exorcise and Obsidian. Again, one of my favorite studios that are under the banner of Xbox Game Studios. But actually, before we get to that, I do want to bring it we got a super chat here. The first one of the day comes the way of Brett Bingham, who is a developer, folks, if you did not know. And he goes on to say this after dropping a $10 super chat. He says most studios do use AI, and quote, most only use it to enhance textures and visuals, ray and path tracing, etc. People aren't doing their due diligence by making these impulse reactions, shaking my head. And yeah, I mean, look, I did see the story that you referred to regarding Expedition 33 being disqualified from the Indie Game Awards, and them taking like this flagpole in the sand situation where Expedition 33 developers Sandful Interactive came out and said, no, hold on a sec. These were placeholders. They were removed before the game came out, and they were still disqualified. They didn't use the AI tools. They were used as a placeholder. You can read the story. Everyone has reported on it. Listen, AI is going to be used. I think that when AI are making games all together, we have a freaking problem. When AI starts voicing people that have passed on, we have a freaking problem, unless that is something the family wants done. AI is a tool, and it should be used as such. It should not become the way that games are made. I'm sorry. I will never sign off on that. I think creator-controlled content and content that is developed by humans needs to continue, and it probably will. Now, granted, I know that there are greedy corporations that want their money when they want it, but I think that that's when the industry will implode and collapse in itself, because you do need humans to make games, and I will never sanction or sign off on a game coming out that's totally made up by a computer. I'm just not going to sign off on that. But Jamie Moran, chat. This is a story, again, comes the way of content creator Ecstasies. You know who he is. You follow him on Twitter. Awesome. If you follow his work on YouTube, the guy is, in my opinion, connected. Yes, he has gotten some things wrong. Yes, he's even used a couple of clickbaitery topics in the last couple of months where I'm not a big fan of it, but I do like him as a content creator because he does have connections. And like I said, I don't know him personally where he's going to invite me over his house for a weekend to hang out and play games, but he has been on the show a couple of times and we do talk regularly. Well, he put out a post that's very interesting, like many of the topics today, and it surrounds Obsidian. Let me read the verbatim from what he wrote on Twitter. Of course, again, this has been added to the show notes. If you want to go and follow Ecstasies, I suggest you do so. If you want to read the post for yourself, you can, in fact, go and do that. He goes on to say Obsidian's CEO, Feargus Urquhart, stated that Obsidian has big plans, including more releases in the shared universe of Avowed and Pillars of Eternity, and more experimental projects like Pentiment. Now, this is where it starts to get exciting, at least for me. Marcus Morgan, the studio's vice president of operations, stated that he and the team want to delve into deeper or dive even deeper into innovative reactivity for games like their cult classic Alpha Protocol, where the main characters could easily and freely be killed within the game. Now, look, I had to reread this twice. I just reread it a third time because I'm reading it live on the air. Look, I don't know how many people enjoy Alpha Protocol or even remember the game, but it was freaking dope. Now, so you might be saying, well, maybe, boom, they're referring to potentially releasing Alpha Protocol. Well, that's a little sticky. So I went and did some research for the show, and this is what I got. The IP, or the intellectual property of Alpha Protocol, is owned by Sega, but the game was delisted from stores due to expired music licensing and creating a complicated situation where developer Obsidian, now owned by Microsoft, technically held the rights to the IP, though Sega has control of its distribution and publishing, leading to its recent revival on GOG through a collaborative relicensing effort with Sega and Obsidian. So let's just start out with the fact that Sega is working with Obsidian. Sega is also working with Microsoft on their Super Games project. Microsoft and an employee that you might know her name. She's the president of Xbox. That's right, Sarah Bond. I'm being facetious. Has taken multiple trips over to Sega, and they are working closely together on what could be big Xbox Game Pass deals. Whether that comes to fruition with some of their super game projects or a lot of the OG Sega games like Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, and games like Streets of Rage and Golden Axe could come to Game Pass, could be published by Sega and put onto Game Pass. We don't know. This is all speculation. But Jamie Moran, what's interesting is some of the conversation that we've always had is Obsidian seems to be the developer that no matter what is on their plate, they deliver. And this year is no exception. I mean, look, I'm sorry, folks. I don't know, Jamie and chat, if there is an award or a trophy for developer of the year. And I know that some people in this chat might immediately go and equate that with Sandfall Interactive because of how incredible Expedition 33 was and how it basically has run the gambit at the Game Awards, and it's probably going to run the gambit at some of the other big award shows like the BAFTAs, for instance. But I am sorry if Obsidian isn't recognized as one of the best devs of 2025, I'm going to say that it's a crime against the game's humanity. They released Avowed, and I don't care what you say, folks. If you don't like the game, good on you. I freaking loved it and will replay that game from scratch via New Game Plus, which is expected to release next year. Grounded 2, a lot of people loved what they did with it. They listened to the fan feedback, and apparently it's amazing. Not for me per se, but for a lot of people, they very much enjoyed it. And all I've done is praise the Outer Worlds 2, which we talked about yesterday, is getting a confirmed 2 expansions. And look, I know that there's no Outer Worlds 3 yet, but there is an Avowed 2, and there's a bunch of other stuff that they're working on. We do know that some people have returned to the studio in a big way. Jamie, I want to get your thoughts on this because Alpha Protocol could be a game that comes back with the help of Sega and Obsidian. We do have obviously some context here that some people within the studio want to return to those different type of games. Alpha Protocol seems like that would be a game that they'd like to return, but we also know that they are working on, this has been confirmed, folks. I'm not making this up. They're working on several unannounced projects. Now, a lot of us, including myself, thought that Fallout New Vegas 2 was a lock, and it should be. But if it's not, and they want to bring back something like, I don't know, Alpha Protocol, yes, because what don't we have enough of? Jamie, you talk about Splinter Cell like you talk about Mass Effect. This would be dope. Let's get your thoughts, brother.
Yeah, I'll mention the license thing quickly. The reason why we don't have a lot of games backwards compatible is because of music licenses. Like, hell, I talk about it all the time. Batman Arkham Origins isn't available on the store to buy because, if I remember correctly, one song.
I believe that's you are correct in saying so.
And I'm playing through it right now, and it's incredible. Like I replay it basically every Christmas. But and if I remember correctly, the Medal of Honor game from 2010, which is extremely underrated, that isn't backwards compatible because of one song in the credits. Like crazy, right? So unfortunately, unlike movies, video games just have these problems with music licenses. Like Alan Wake, a couple 2 years ago got delisted, and then it got put back up because Remedy actually care about their games long term, and they actually sort all that stuff out, thankfully. But when it comes to Alpha Protocol was relisted on or listed on GOG about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was like, okay, so maybe something's happening with this game. I know there's people that want this backwards compatible. I unfortunately missed out on it back in the day because it came out when I was big into Call of Duty multiplayer. I would love to be able to play that. It's a third-person shooter, espionage RPG. We don't get games like that. I think that's a good thing about Obsidian. They can make just a wide variety of games. You mentioned Avowed. Like we talked about Avowed a lot this year. I think Avowed was great, right? And it was very different to the Outer Worlds. And then you have Grounded, which is a survival game, which is very different. You have Pentiment, which is a different game. Like Obsidian clearly know how to make a wide variety of games and RPGs. And I think going back to something like Alpha Protocol, I would love to see that in the future. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe that's me, a Mass Effect fan talking, but like a third person shooter RPGs, we just don't get many of them. Like hell, one time Sega was meant to work with Obsidian on a third person shooter Aliens RPG, right? It got cancelled.
Right? Yeah.
And there's footage on YouTube people can watch, and I so wish that was a thing. But who knows what we'll see? And they're mentioning an Alpha Protocol. I'm getting my hopes up, I know. But considering what Xbox and Obsidian's been like over the past few years, and you have the Xbox Developer Direct in January, maybe that's something we'll see. Uh, they have said that they're working on multiple titles, and they'll surprise us again. Like, but for some reason, people really like to hate on Avowed, and I can't really figure out why. like it was a fun RPG set in the Pillars of Eternity universe. It already has some extended lore, so like there's a built-in fantasy like fan base there ready for a new game like that. And considering how big Baldur's Gate 3 was, maybe more people would be in for a Pillars of Eternity 3. You know, I think Obsidian of any of Microsoft studios that make RPGs, they are going to be the ones that surprise us. They really are. They can make anything.
Yep.
And the fact that they came out with 3 games in 1 year, that's incredible. They can make really big games and really unique games with small teams at the same time. And then you have one of the founders or one of the creators of Fallout back at Obsidian now, and they are making a game that they can't talk about yet. And as a fan of RPGs, I could talk about role playing games all day. I love that stuff. Um, it's good to see that they have like one of the OGs back, and they're going to be making games for RPG fans by RPG fans, and that's what Obsidian's all about. They'll experiment with something like a Pentiment or Grounded, which people like, but for me, it's all about RPGs, and it sounds like they're really going to be cooking something good. And if they lean into the whole espionage aspect again, because like, look, they can do sci-fi, they can do fantasy.
Yeah,
I would love to see them do a modern day espionage game. And like you said, I talk about Splinter Cell all day, maybe too much, but like, look, we don't get Splinter Cell games ever anymore. I'm convinced the Splinter Cell remake doesn't exist. Right? People from Ubisoft have actually told me that it does exist. No, I'm calling it lies. Until I have it in my hands, it doesn't exist. I'm suspicious of Ubisoft, and I can't prove it yet, but I'm sure that game doesn't exist. But if we can get Obsidian on a new espionage RPG, my god, that would sell. It would be so different, so unique for people. Like a lot of people are hyped for the Bond game, which unfortunately just got delayed um till May, which isn't that bad. But like people want more games like that. And like, look, Alpha Protocol was very different to their other games. Very different. I think people would be up for something different. But yeah, that's my take. I think Alpha Protocol coming back, especially after its PC listing last year. Maybe they've been making a new version for Xbox consoles. We'll see, but it gives me some hope that something's actually happening.
So again, folks, we're going to take, before we get on out of here, I just want to add some additional context to this, because it's breadcrumbs, right? It's what we do as content creators. We find these stories. Sometimes we get information from other creators like Ecstasies, where you get people like Hazardor Gaming or Shinobi 602, or you get someone like Okami 13 underscore. These are all incredible content creators in their own rights, because they put out these stories that we would normally read from like a Game Rant or an IGN or something. And I don't really like to use the big trades anymore, because I don't trust them and I don't like a lot of them. I will give credit where credit is due when I do use the stories, and there are some that I do enjoy using regularly, like VGC, the Andy Robinson run Video Games Chronicles, one of my favorites, to be honest with you. Of course, Jez Corden of Windows Central and the team that they have over there, Samuel Tolbert and the likes. I love their journalists. I really do. But I do like to occasionally go out and find my own things. And that's what I did right here with this particular story, because I remember playing Alpha Protocol. And it's just, I don't know if it's interesting timing or what, but the the story that Jamie broke, or we talked about briefly, about it coming back last year to GOG, was a collaborative effort by both Sega and Obsidian. Now, what's interesting about that is Obsidian is obviously owned by Microsoft. Sega has an unbelievable relationship with Microsoft and more specifically Xbox. The other interesting thought and theory here is the report, and this is a confirmed report. I'm going to go look for it and add it to the show notes if you want to follow the breadcrumbs with me and Jamie when the show goes up on video on demand. But they have been confirmed to be working on several unannounced projects. And like I said in my spiel before, we, meaning me, have equated that to potentially being something Fallout related. And that could very well be true. It could be a new Fallout somewhere else. It could be Fallout New Vegas too, which I think would print money, right? It would be a game that prints freaking money because for a lot of people, including me, the host of this show, that is my favorite Fallout. But what if Jamie is onto something? What if our suggestions that a new alpha protocol is potentially in the works? So why I think that Jamie, you're onto something. You might have hit the nail on the head perfectly here. Is you said something about Obsidian, the talent at that studio, the leadership at that studio seems to be, in my personal opinion, because they're my favorite developer of Xbox Game Studios, the tip of spear. And you said something that's very interesting. They can make different types of games. Avowed is a fantasy game. Grounded 2 is a survival game. The Outer Worlds 2 is a space exploratory type of RPG. All different genres, all different games, but a pinch the same. And one of the things that is missing and has been missing for a decade plus is an espionage type of game. And this could see the return of what I believe I think it's a legendary IP that did not get enough shine, in my opinion. Jamie, before we get on out of here, any closing thoughts about what I just said?
I mean, look, I'm being optimistic. I do think that we could say something about Alpha Protocol because, like, getting the GOG listing like a year ago, they had to have worked out stuff with the music licenses, and we've seen in the past year, we have seen, Microsoft and Sega work together on games that are basically only on their platform, and that is Warhammer 40K Space Marine, the remaster, right? That was a random shadow drop, didn't leak, nobody knew about it, and then, oh yeah, by the way, Sega announced, oh, here's a remaster available now and also in Game Pass, right? No warning whatsoever, right? And this was like after Space Marine 2 was out for almost a year. Like people didn't expect a remaster, especially since like Sega was the publisher. So like considering it is Sega, I'm leaning into we maybe could see something. Because if we can get a Space Marine remaster, why can't we get an Alpha Protocol remaster? I think people would eat that up, especially considering we don't have games like that at the minute. But it is Obsidian, and I just like the fact that they can come out with multiple titles within like a short period of time. Because I think, this year, most games that Microsoft put out were announced this year. So if you look at next year, you have Fable, you have Forza Horizon 6, you have Gears of War ED, Halo Campaign Evolved. Like, that's 4 titles, 4 big titles. What's to say that they don't have maybe double that they're going to surprise us with? Right? If you go back a year and a half ago, you might think I'm being crazy, but this year it's been a great year. And like you're saying, like the mainstream gaming media and stuff, they're talking about how it's been a bad year for Xbox and stuff. But if you're an Xbox fan that likes Xbox games, look at this year, right? How many different games did they put out? A lot of variety, which I think we need more of in gaming. And multiple RPGs, big focus on single player, and they still have put out multiplayer games. Like, just off this year alone, it's been great. In fact, I think it's been Microsoft's best first party year ever, right? You look at next year and you have Halo, Forza, Gears, Fable at the minimum. Yeah, I think they could surprise us, and I think Obsidian will be one of those studios.
Well, I like what you're putting down, brother. And I think that if there is one studio that can, it's definitely Obsidian. And again, it's not me trying to be facetious and compare one to the other. Obsidian is, in my opinion, as good and great as Bethesda, and Bethesda is as good and great as Obsidian. I think they both bring a significant amount of incredible IP, talent, and leadership to gaming. More specifically, Xbox gaming. And right now, the best place for RPGs from first party, right here at Xbox Game Studios. And I'm excited for it. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for us here. Again, tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a solo project here at noon. We're going to be looking into 2026 and what we can get excited about for that year, but not just the games. There's a lot more going on, and we're going to have fun with the show. There's going to be some commentary that I'm going to have from some of the some of the C-level executives, and I have all of that, written and ready to go. It's only going to be about 60 minutes, and like I said, I'm doing this stream tomorrow to kind of give you guys and gals something to listen to, because it just was becoming very daunting to try and pre-record content to drop on the days that we weren't streaming live. And obviously, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I do want to unplug with Mrs. Boom. We kind of just want to enjoy each other's company, eat some great food, hang out super late, and maybe play some games. The following week, we'll be back Monday and Tuesday. I will be doing a show Wednesday, again in the same vein, a 60-minute show. I may have a guest, I may not. It may be a solo show also, but it's going to be looking into the my personal top 10 games and it's a multi-plat show. So we're going to be talking about PlayStation and Nintendo for 2026. That will be next Wednesday, New Year's Eve at noon. And of course, then that Thursday, it's New Year's Day. I'm taking off Friday morning, which would be January 2nd. We'll be back with the first Breakfast with Boom of the year. And we'll see, again, if everyone could be there, we'll have the show. If not, we'll take another I'll take another 4-day swing and just enjoy the weekend with Mrs. Boom. But that's going to do it for us here. Jamie Moran, Sell the Brand. Now, I don't know if you guys are doing a show this evening, but if you are, I want you to tell the people where they can tune in to check out the new episode of the All Thing Xbox podcast with you and Logan Meyer. Normally it's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the States. Brother, Sell the Brand. Where can people not only subscribe to the Elusive Gamer YouTube channel, but more importantly, follow you on social media?
Yeah, thanks, Boom. It's always a pleasure. So the Elusive Gamer is my YouTube channel. I exclusively cover Xbox. I try to talk about Mass Effect, though, at any given opportunity. All Things Xbox podcast is on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. We are having the last episode of the year tonight. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about, at the minute, we have 12 topics. It's normally about a 2-hour show. It's going to be a fun time over there. There's never any fanboy stuff or no toxic anything. It's just always fun, game and chat, and I hope people enjoy the show. And it is the last show of the year, so we're going to be talking about a bunch of releases coming out next year, what was thought about games that came out this year. It's going to be a fun one. And at 6 p.m. Eastern on the Elusive Gamer YouTube channel. Hope everyone listening has a great Christmas. This time of year, some people still get wrapped up in the whole console war thing. It's like people need to take time out, just relax, spend time with your family, friends, game, or if you maybe drink a bit too much, but it's Christmas.
Well, I mean, listen, you're supposed to celebrate, folks. And at the end of the day, look, it's about games. Love the console you love, right? That's fine. Love the games you love. Love the developers you love. Play their games, buy their games, support the industry. But again, I understand opinions, folks, but we're all allowed to have ours as long as they're not toxic. Because if they're toxic, they won't be in this chat for much longer. Because Lethal Papa walks silently and carries a real big band stick is going to be upping his ante in 2026. And anyone, and I mean anyone, that's a toxic AFMF is going to be bounced. We're not going to stand for it. We're just not, because we're here to have fun. But ladies and gentlemen, again, a big thank you to Brett Bingham for the super chat of $10 earlier today. Again, tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be doing a Christmas Eve special. And of course, I'm going to close out the show with something that's incredibly important to me. Hopefully, one day, ladies and gentlemen, it will be important to you. And that's something that my dad taught us when we were kids. He would say, Craig, treat others how you want to be treated. And also, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. To live by those rules, son, I can guarantee you're going to have an awesome day. So take care, everyone. And we'll see you next week on the newest episode of the Xbox Factor Podcast.